Thank you, Judy. Kia ora, good evening. Thank you to the Centre of Genetics and Society for inviting me to Tarrytown as one of your international participants, and thank you too for your absolutely splendid organisation of this meeting. Relationships between the US and New Zealand are long-standing, at times very warm, at other times, such as when New Zealand became anti-nuclear, a little cooler. My first contact with a citizen of this country was as a very, very small child when, during World War II, a young, scared Marine named Junior was billeted with my family on our farm in the South Island of New Zealand for several weeks of rest and recreation. And he bought me a teddy bear, which I still have. He left to fight in the Pacific and was killed about the day after he arrived, but I still have the correspondence between my mother and his. According to a news report I read just a few days ago, relationships are now at an all-time high because President Obama, at a dinner in Washington last week for our New Zealand Prime Minister who was visiting, recounted how during our recent February earthquake in Christchurch, New Zealanders at lunch with a party of visiting US congressmen gave them first option to the space under the restaurant tables. And they felt that this was a most generous gesture before they were escorted to safety outside. And like many other New Zealanders, I need to thank you for sending search and rescue teams to New Zealand when we needed them. Now, my reflections this evening are going to be centred on attitudes to ART in New Zealand and contrast and point up differences between the US and New Zealand in our approach to assisted reproductive technology. Now, first, an observation. In our handouts, in the folder we got a list of core values and principles. And reproduced there were the principles from the 2005 Human-Assisted Reproductive Technology Act that New Zealand passed to regulate ART, as I'll now refer to it. Rich, and to other staff members, I noticed that in the combined appendium on page 32, you missed out what I would say were values, well, you said in here that they were so specific to a particular constituency that you wouldn't include them in the general list. I would just like to commend to you the missing principles that are not on the last page of this compendium, because I think particularly our attitude to our Indigenous people and the requirement to take account of the needs, values and beliefs of Māori, and our attitude to the importance of children being able to have the knowledge of their genetic origins, are values and are principles which could well be shared in the international community. So you can see the full list in this document. So that's an observation. Now to differences. My background to this is, as I've said, the Heart Act 2004, which was passed after perhaps 25 years of gestation, during which there were reports and draft bills. Some of the differences are, in New Zealand, prior to the legislation, our fertility clinics undertook voluntary regulation of themselves. And this was a combined Australia-New Zealand approach, and the result of that is that there has always been a high degree of trust in the providers of fertility services in New Zealand. From conversations with you, I understand that would not be the case in the US. Our attitudes to the payment for gametes, embryos and surrogates are also very contrasting. Our law prohibits the commercialisation of gametes, embryos and paying for surrogates. Our attitude to known versus anonymous donations is a contrast. Our law says that a register must be kept on which is recorded the details of every donor and that any child born as a result of assisted reproductive technology has access to that information on turning 18. That is a policy-wide approach that says genetic origins are of such importance that everyone must have the right of access to them. Our attitudes to sex selection are also different. Our law prohibits it. There is also an acceptance of regulation by both clinics and the public in New Zealand. It isn't a matter of contention. The clinics did not fight against it. Discussions about ART in New Zealand are not overlaid with arguments or discussion about abortion. That was set to rest back in the 1970s and it does not reappear. Our politicians are not asked about their attitudes to either religion or abortion. We have, I think, a great awareness of other countries. I could not give advice to my Minister of Health, and I do have given a great deal of advice to him, but appended to every piece of advice is a summary of the attitudes of other countries to that topic on which I am giving advice. He wants to know it, where we stand in relation to the rest of the world. I'm not certain that here there would be such awareness of other people's attitudes as we would have about, for example, yours. I'm sorry to say that because of the differences between us, there is an acknowledgement that there is no benchmarking by us against the US because our differences are too great on fundamentals. Although my appointment is a political one, I'm appointed by the government, I have to say I have been able to hold my position through different changes of government. Some learnings that I have from the role I have played over the last 9 years as a government appointing, with respect to the education that was mentioned last night, yes, we need more education of the public. I regret that I did not take advantage when I had the opportunity to make submissions on the draft bill, that education was not included in the bill as a requirement and therefore it would be resourced. And so there is no proper means of education. I think we also need to pay attention. I have difficulty at times in communicating with different ministers of health because of their lack of background about these issues. Yet they have told me I have to make it simple enough for them to take it to Cabinet and to present these issues to their fellow Cabinet members. So this is another area we have to consider. The political reality, as with a speaker mentioned the IBC and how, in fact, I was involved in drafting the declaration on human genetic data, and yes, it did get watered down. I accept that that's the political reality, as I accept that not all our advice to the government will be accepted because of political realities and their requirement to want to be re-elected. But most of what we do is accepted. So I accept success is having the majority of what you put forward accepted. I think in New Zealand we are realising we have to have much more proactive management of issues arising from fertility treatment in other countries, and we are moving to that, particularly on surrogacies. I would like to see more involvement of children born from assisted reproductive technology in our public consultations. That is something we have not been achieving yet, but I know we must do it. My learning also over the years has been that a much greater consideration must be given to not just the rights of donors, but the responsibility of donors. I do not believe that they can stay silent in the future with respect to the children born as a result of ART. And I have learned that we must put greater emphasis on the rights of children born, the health and well-being of children born as a result of assisted reproductive technology. If we consider that, I think you would not have commercial sale of gametes. My suggestions for the future with respect to ART, I think we could have much more discussion at the global level as to the impacts of different positions with respect to assisted reproductive technology by different countries and how to manage these. I do not believe we're all going to come up with the same regulatory systems, but I do believe that if we discuss the differences and figured out management, proactive management, so that everyone knew what they were getting into before they went ahead and did it. I think it could be possible that from listening here for the last 2 days that there could be agreement on a set of principles to provide guidance. I think I'm blessed in New Zealand by the legislation, including that list of principles against which I have to measure everything. Every piece of advice is measured against that set of principles. And maybe you don't need legislation if you have a really good set of principles. I think that on the whole, more attention needs to be given to the consideration of the well-being of the children born from assisted reproductive technology. And at that point, I would like to finish. Thank you very much for your attention.